Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, speaks all night and all day on the Senate floor about what he calls President Donald Trump's growing authoritarianism. He ends after more than 22 and a half hours. It's day 22 of the federal government shutdown, and it appears Republican and Democratic positions have not moved, remaining at odds, and the government will stay closed for now. It's less than 2 weeks until the closely watched Virginia gubernatorial election between Republican Winsome Earle-Sears and Democrat Abigail Spanberger. We'll hear from both candidates. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visits Washington for meetings with President Trump at the White House and senators on Capitol Hill after the postponement of a summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hungary on Russia's war in Ukraine. And Vice President JD Vance joins Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The Vice President saying he and other Trump administration officials have not been going to Israel to monitor the status of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire in Gaza as one monitors a toddler, but instead ensuring that, as the Vice President says, our people are doing what we need them to do. Associated Press writing, led by Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrats seized the Senate floor on Wednesday to protest President Donald Trump's presidency amid the government shutdown and push for Republicans to negotiate with them on expiring health subsidies. Merkley spoke for more than 22 hours from 6:20 p.m. Tuesday to 5 p.m. on Wednesday, pausing for lengthy questions from other Democratic senators. His speech was one of the longest in Senate history, just short of a similar speech in April by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Booker, who was also protesting Trump, broke the record with a speech that lasted longer than 25 hours, surpassing a 1957 speech by Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, filibustering the advance of the Civil Rights Act. That was from AP. Here is Senator Merkley Wednesday afternoon during his speech.
But then people posed a different question in my town halls. They said, we've seen the president evoke emergency powers or just grab authorities that the law doesn't give the president. So what's to prevent the president from evoking emergency powers, saying there's a crisis, and delaying the next election? Maybe arguing that the voting machines are not yet properly free of some virus that's infected them, or arguing that the vote can't go forward because the president's put out an edict about vote by mail and states are still using vote by mail. Again, I think it's an enormous stretch and unlikely, but I will say we damn well better be on our guard, because we didn't expect to have a president who would attack due process and ignore it, and we have it. We didn't expect to have a president who would blackmail law firms, and we have it. We didn't expect to have a president who would use licenses and merger power to try to control what networks put on TV, but we have it. We didn't expect to have a president who would weaponize the Justice Department to go after a list of his public enemies, that he's identified as his public enemies. We didn't expect to have a president who would try to get the court decisions to enable him to deploy troops whenever he wants against public dissent in the United States of America, yet we have it. So I say to you, ring the alarm bells, because all of those things are worthy of ringing them loud and hard.
Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, on the Senate floor Wednesday afternoon. He started speaking Tuesday night, didn't end until early Wednesday evening, clocking in, C-SPAN calculates, at 22 hours and 37 minutes as he spoke, and yielded for questions from other Democratic senators. USA Today writing, Merkley's talkathon comes as Democrats have been increasingly willing to resort to drastic measures to exert what relatively little political leverage they have in Congress over Republicans. The government shutdown, which is largely rooted in Democrats' demands over health care policy and the refusal of GOP leaders to negotiate over those requests while on a funding deadline, has now become the second longest in U.S. history. That was from USA Today. After Senator Merkley finished, Senator John Barrasso, Republican of Wyoming, a majority whip, came to the floor.
One of our colleagues just spent over 22 hours on this floor reading from a book, reciting poetry, one poem at least 4 times, and talking about renovations currently going on at the White House. It was 22 hours of what I can only describe as rubbish. I come to the floor today to ask a simple question. What did Democrats actually accomplish? The government's still closed. Capitol police officers and Senate support staffers who were here for the entire 22 hours are still not getting paid. So let me read, Mr. President, from the record and into the record, an article published today in the Daily Caller written by Adam Pack. The headline is this. It's entitled, "Democrat Forces Unpaid Capitol Police to Stay Up All Night so he can rail against Republicans." Let me tell you the title again. Democrat forces unpaid Capitol Police to stay up all night so he can rail against Republicans. The article goes on. Democrats are refusing to pay support staff and Capitol Police during the government shutdown, but still force them to work overnight Wednesday so a lawmaker could rail against the Trump administration from an empty Senate chamber.
Senator John Barrasso, the majority whip, Republican from Wyoming, on the Senate floor after Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, finished up his almost full-day speech. We'll have more on the government shutdown coming up in a couple of minutes here on C-SPAN Radio. But first, one of the posters Senator Merkley used on an easel next to him during his Senate floor speech read, "Ring the alarm bells, authoritarianism is here now." And that was part of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing today with witness Andrew Duva nominated for Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, asked about the recent indictments of some of President Donald Trump's political opponents, including New York Attorney General Letitia James and former FBI Director James Comey.
Would you agree that no one should be prosecuted for their political beliefs or because they're a personal or political adversary of the president?
Thank you for the question, Senator Blumenthal. I can't speak to those cases because I'm not
I'm asking you in general, and I think it's a yes or no question.
Yes, Senator. And as I said in my opening statement, individuals are prosecuted based on the facts, and those facts as applied to the law. And for 18 years as an AUSA, I wrote a pros memo in every case.
I'm going to interrupt you with apologies because I have limited amounts of time.
Yes,
I'm going to take that as a yes, that they should be based on the facts and the law, not the president's personal feelings of animosity or political opposition. Let me just follow up, because you're going to be in this position if you are pressured by someone in the White House, including the president, to bring criminal charges that you believe are unsupported by the facts and the law. Would you resign?
We're going to evaluate every case that we receive, Senator, based on the facts and the law, and we will have processes. I mentioned a prosecution memorandum that I will evaluate at the highest level of the criminal division, and I will consult with the Deputy Attorney General, and my decision will be based solely on the facts and the law in every case.
And I'm asking what you would do if you are instructed to bring an indictment, to seek an indictment from a grand jury that you believe is lacking in facts and legal support. Would you resign? Would you stand up? Would you be counted? It's not enough to say, we'll review it on the process and so forth. Now is your time to tell this committee that you'll have the backbone to stand on conscience and conviction.
I don't think I'll be in that position, Senator, but all I can say is I will do what I've always done based on the Justice Manual and the process and the ethics of my office is evaluate cases based on the facts and the law and make decisions. They will not be based on personal animus. They will not be based on tweets. They will not be based on anything but the facts and the law in each case.
I'm disappointed in that response because I think it's less than the American people deserve by way of a commitment to the rule of law.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, questioning Andrew Duva nominated for Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division at today's Judiciary Committee hearing. There's a story from Fox News. Lawyers for former FBI Director James Comey asked a federal judge Monday to dismiss his criminal case on the grounds of vindictive and selective prosecution, citing what they argued is President Donald Trump's personal animus towards James Comey and what they allege was the unlawful appointment of the U.S. attorney who was tasked with bringing the case. More from the Judiciary Committee hearing. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, also asking witness Andrew Duva about weaponizing government.
I've noticed that you've been asked a number of questions about hypotheticals, about political interference. What would happen if so-and-so tried to interfere in an investigation? What would happen if you were asked to pursue politically motivated ends? What would happen if you were asked to pursue or launch a politically motivated investigation? So let me just ask you about a non-hypothetical, just to get your response, something that actually happened. Like, for example, the United States Department of Justice seeking to track the cell phones of 8 members of the United States Senate without any criminal predicate, without any notice to any senator, multiple of whom sit on this committee, including myself, without any legal process to the senator targeted whatsoever. They tracked all incoming calls to our phones, all outgoing calls to our phones, all metadata associated with the calls, including location, the duration of the calls. Does this sound appropriate to you? Does this sound like appropriate behavior for the Department of Justice to be engaged in?
Senator Hawley, I appreciate the question, and I'm noticing the panel's asking me a lot. I'm happy to share with my colleagues as we keep going in this discussion. But, sir, what I think you're talking about is issuing a grand jury subpoena for cell phone records. And in any investigation, you better have, pursuant to the Justice Manual, specific and articulable facts about why you're doing that. If you do not have that and you cannot articulate those facts under 18 U.S.C. 2703, that subpoena does not get served.
Andrew Duva, nominated for Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, questioned by Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, at a Judiciary Committee hearing. Reuters, writing, a group of hundreds of former U.S. national security officials on Tuesday urged lawmakers to examine an internal government group that has been coordinating President Donald Trump's retribution drive against his perceived enemies. The Steady State, a rule of law advocacy group, issued its call for congressional inquiries into the Interagency Weaponization Working Group in a letter to the top Republicans and Democrats on the Senate and House Intelligence, Judiciary, and Armed Services Committees. Reporting from Reuters. Executive branch power, also a subject today at a forum hosted by the Society for the Rule of Law, a self-described group of conservative and libertarian lawyers standing up for the rule of law, which has been described by reporters as opposing the interpretation and application of law in the Constitution as President Trump and his supporters see it. Michael Luttig, retired federal appeals court judge and a society board member, was on a panel discussing lawsuits against many of the president's actions.
The arguments that are being made in all the courts, frankly, by the Department of Justice attorneys under Pam Bondi are contemptuous, not just of the Constitution and the rule of law, but contemptuous of the federal courts, and even, if not especially, contemptuous of the individual judges that are hearing the cases. Not only has this never happened in all of American history, not one argument like the arguments that these people are making to the federal courts has ever been made in American history, dripping with the contempt that these arguments are.
Michael Luttig, who was a federal appeals court judge 1991 through 2006 at today's Society for the Rule of Law Summit in Washington, D.C. This is Washington Today. Today is day 22 of the federal government shutdown, second longest in U.S. history. Only the 35-day shutdown in 2018 into 19 was longer, and if this shutdown goes beyond November 5th, it would break the record. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, said at a news conference that Senate Democrats should vote for the temporary government funding extension the House passed a few weeks ago and reopen the government.
Welcome to day 22 of the Democrat shutdown. While it's already been, as we noted yesterday, the longest full government shutdown in history, October 22nd marks another landmark. This is now the second longest government shutdown of any kind ever in the history of our country, and it's just shameful. Democrats keep making history, but they're doing it for all the wrong reasons. The contrast is the split screen, and I've referenced that at this podium a few times already, but I just think it's an important thing to point out, because that contrast between the two parties grows more glaring with each passing day, and you can look at all the evidence for yourself. There is, of course, a literal split screen every day. You've got Republicans and Democrats out all over the airwaves, burning them up, speaking directly to the American people. But you'll note that there's a key difference between the messages of the two sides. The Republicans are all repeating the same simple truth, and that is why that message is resonating with the American people, and that's what the polling indicates. At the same time, on the other side, the Democrats are doing their very best to obscure and create distractions from that simple truth. So the reason that we find it important to come out here every day and repeat again the same simple truth is because they're trying so hard to cover that up.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at today's news conference with other House Republican leaders. As he mentioned, they have been doing this every morning. House Democrats today held another healthcare forum to highlight their support of adding an extension of expiring enhanced Obamacare insurance premium tax credits to a CR continuing resolution that would reopen the government. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, made some opening remarks.
Today is day 22 of the Trump Republican shutdown of the federal government, and all across the country, everyday Americans are hurting. Hardworking federal employees are working without pay or have been furloughed from their positions. Those who have dedicated their lives to public service have no certainty about how they will pay their bills, mortgage, rent, or feed their families. National parks and museums are closed. Federal agencies are operating at limited capacity to assist everyday Americans with the real issues that they confront day to day. If this shutdown of the federal government by Donald Trump and Republicans continue, folks may even lose nutritional assistance benefits that they depend on to feed themselves, their children, and their families and keep food on the table. To make matters worse, Republicans won't even commit to making sure, consistent with the law that was passed in 2019, that all federal workers receive back pay when the government reopens. It's unconscionable, unacceptable, and un-American, and we are determined to make sure that every single federal employee receives the entirety of their pay. Republicans have been running an extreme play from the very beginning of this year. Donald Trump and his out-of-control administration have already illegally fired more than 200,000 federal employees prior to the beginning of the government shutdown. And they continue to visit chaos, cruelty, and confusion on the American people. Day after day, Speaker Johnson has kept House Republicans on a taxpayer-funded vacation, canceling votes 4 consecutive weeks. They shut the government down, ran out of town, and now are nowhere to be found. In fact, since July 22nd, 3 months ago, House Republicans have only worked in Washington for 14 days since the end of July. They are hiding from the American people, but House Democrats understand our responsibility to run toward and embrace the American people as we defend their health care, their quality of life, and work hard to drive down the high cost of living in the United States of America. Meanwhile, President Trump is busy demolishing the White House to build a ballroom to celebrate him like a king, and giving $40 billion to his right-wing dictator friend in Argentina, but can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of Americans. But there's a simple solution for Republicans. Get back to work. Sit down with Democrats. We're ready, we're willing, we're able to reopen the government, to enact a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, and to address the Republican health care crisis that is devastating families all across this country.
The U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee hearing on the government shutdown and health care. Press release describes it as House Democrats are on Capitol Hill hearing directly from Americans impacted by service cuts, mass firings, and health care price hikes. At the White House, President Donald Trump was asked about the government shutdown as he was in the Oval Office meeting with the NATO Secretary General.
Mr. President, on the shutdown, do you plan to meet with Democrats before you head to Asia? And if not, why not meet with the Democrats?
Well, I think it's a shame that it's shut down because we have the greatest economy, as you were saying before. We have the greatest economy in the world right now, by far, the United States. We have almost 18, now it was 17, now it's $18 trillion being poured into our country, and it's no time for shutdowns. I don't think it's affecting what we're doing, but it's too bad for a lot of people. We have a lot of good people that aren't working right now that should be, and it's because the Democrats want to try and renegotiate a deal that they had negotiated. They want $1.5 trillion given to illegal immigrants who came into the country, and it's going to hurt the health care of citizens of our country that have been paying into it, that have been working hard for it, that really deserve it. So we're never going to do that. It's not going to happen. And I will tell you, there are a lot of good Democrats that really want to make a deal. And I think all we need is 5 Democrats because we have great support on the Republican side. So I think we need 5 Democrats, and there are a lot of them that want to make a deal. So I think at some point, common sense will prevail.
President Donald Trump taking reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. This was during his meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And the Senate failed for a 12th time today to advance the Republican short-term government funding measure. The vote was 54-46, short of the 60 votes needed. Democrats Cortez Masto of Nevada, Fetterman of Pennsylvania, along with independent Senator King of Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats, voted with the Republicans yes, and 1 Republican voted no, Rand Paul of Kentucky. The Majority Leader, John Thune, a Republican, switched his vote from yes to no to allow for another vote. Many House and Senate Republicans and the White House have been reposting a clip of the House Minority Whip, Katherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, who was interviewed on Fox News, adding some comments. First, here's the clip.
Shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously. But it is one of the few leveraged times we have.
Congresswoman Katherine Clark, Minority Whip, interviewed on Fox News. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican of Oklahoma, quote, tweeting that, adding, "They're saying the quiet part out loud. The Schumer shutdown is all politics." And from Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa, Democrats know their Schumer shutdown is making Americans suffer, and they don't even care. Their political stunt needs to end today. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, writing, the Democrats are now admitting that they're intentionally causing American families to suffer with their reckless government shutdown. What is wrong with them? Congresswoman Clark was later at a news conference and was asked by the same Fox News reporter who had interviewed her, Chad Pergram, about the reference to leverage.
The White House just said in the past hour that it was Democrats who were essentially being punitive by saying, let them cut some of those programs and we'll use this as leverage. What's your response to that?
I would put that in the category of love and cherishing Medicaid and lowering your costs on day one. It's an outrageous, they have been attacking federal workers. Their goal was to inflict trauma. Whether it is firings, proposing that some people will not get the back pay that they are entitled to get under federal law in this shutdown, making things as difficult as possible. I mean, the way they have treated workers, whether they're federal workers or hardworking people in our community who are trying to provide for their families and are struggling to do that, it is just a let them eat cake moment. You just fend for yourselves, because we'll tell you who we're working for. Those who already have great wealth and power, full stop. So they can say whatever they want. They can issue and try and spin the context. Federal workers know who's on their side. And working people in this country are watching what is happening and watching them put them last. You get in line. Your tax credits that help you pay for insurance premiums, those expire. Those for the very wealthiest, we're making those permanent in the very same month, in the month of December. It is outrageous. And the fact that they aren't even showing up, you don't even show up to do your job, is something that it is no wonder that the American people are showing up and 7 million strong at rallies on Saturdays, but also showing up in poll after poll saying, this doesn't work for me. The system was already rigged against me, and now it's getting worse due to your policies. So they should really look in the mirror. And if they've decided that cutting people's health insurance in order to give the wealthiest people in this country a tax break is a bad policy, we are here to meet with them and talk about how we can undo this. Let's put the people back into the proposition here and end this shutdown.
House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, Democrat from Massachusetts, at a news conference with other House Democratic leaders. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette writing 3 weeks into what's become the longest full government shutdown in history, U.S. Senator John Fetterman said he would fully endorse the idea of Republicans bypassing the filibuster rule so they could pass their spending plan without any Democratic support. Pennsylvania Democrat has bucked his party since the shutdown began, repeatedly voting for the GOP plan despite Democrats insisting that it include an extension of expiring health care credits, but ending filibuster would make Mr. Fetterman's vote or the support of any Democratic senator unnecessary. Instead of requiring 60 votes to pass, it would allow the spending bill to pass with a simple majority. That was from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Senator Fetterman posted a video today standing outside the U.S. Capitol.
Hi, here we are, and our government remains closed. And I think that's failure. And I'm the guy that's going to consistently vote for country over party. I'm always going to vote for paying our military over the party. I'm always going to vote for paying the Capitol Police over my party. And I'm going to continue to fight for the 2 million Pennsylvanians that depend on SNAP to feed themselves. And I'm also going to fight for the same 400,020 Pennsylvanians that depend on those tax credits to make health insurance more affordable. Two things are true, and now we can fight for all of them as long as our government is open. My vote is going to remain firmly on keeping our government open, and I'm going to continue to fight for all of those Pennsylvanians that I'm honored to represent here.
Senator John Fetterman, Democrat of Pennsylvania, in a video on day 22 of the federal government shutdown. The Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins traveled to Washington, D.C.'s VA Medical Center to talk about the federal government shutdown and the impact it has been having on care.
We are sitting in right now one of the best parts of the VA as far as dealing with the shutdown. My call to the Congress, pass the bill. Get the shutdown right now that's being held up in the Senate, because we can't get, frankly, and this is not my words, this is the words of AP, it's the words of New Yorker, it's the words of New York Times. The Democrat shutdown has caused us 5 votes that they can't get the bill open up. So look, VHA, let me just assure everybody here, healthcare system is working. We have pre-approved funds. We go into an advanced funding appropriation. So nobody should be, no matter what you read or what you hear, if you need healthcare at the VA here, especially in Washington and all over the country, are actually operating. Our clinics are operating. They're going through exactly what they've been doing all along. And by the way, I just have to say they're doing it better, faster, and quicker, and more quality than we've seen in years. And I think that's the testament to the doctors, the nurses, the administrators saying, hey, for the first time, we can make changes that actually help our veterans. I received a call just the other day from a doctor out in Colorado who called me up because I had talked to him because he'd give some good care, and I just picked up the phone one day in the airport and called him and said, hey, I heard about what you did. And he began to talk. Well, he checked me out, which is I'm glad he did. He said, I saw you on Sean Ryan podcast. I saw you on these others. He said, I believe in what you're talking about. He said, I want to talk to you about how I can help my patients. So I had a good conversation with him, and he was able to give us some stuff that is going to help us with patients. That's what this is all about. That's why we do what we do. And so as we continue on to look at this functionality in VHA, I'm very proud of VHA. Now, How does that affect the rest? Well, in VBA, we're mostly on furlough. That means our disability payments are still being made. Please don't worry about your disability benefits. And we're all processing them, but I'm having them processed by people who are not getting paid. This is not right. It shouldn't happen. We need to fix that. And in our cemeteries right now, basically everybody in our cemeteries is on furlough as well, but they're exempted coming back in, so we're able to do our burials and the things we need. Now, where does it affect us? And this is what I want Congress to loudly hear. I have veterans who are getting out of active duty who are trying to get their employment. They're trying to get skills. They're trying to get their new job set up. They're trying to get the tools, which our VR&E, our vocational rehab and education folks are able to do. And guess what? Right now, they can't do it. They're shut down. So we have some people who are trying to make a life outside of their time in the service, and they can't do this because Congress has decided that they want to shut the government down. And I just call on right now Congress to get this done. I see it right now. I served in Congress for 8 years. I know the hill. It's time for my friends across the aisle to vote to open the government just like they've done 18 times while I was there and others, and then have the discussions that you need to do on policy. Quit holding my veterans hostage right now in the way we're doing it.
Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins at the D.C. VA Medical Center. USA Today has an article titled 10 Key Dates to Watch as Government Shutdown Nears Record Length. October 24th, first full paychecks of federal workers missed. October 25th, President Donald Trump leaves for Asia. October 31st, next paycheck for military members due. October 31st and November 5th, next checks for congressional staff. November 1st, open enrollment for Obamacare begins and Head Start funding at risk. November 5th, record for longest shutdown. And then looking ahead, the Thanksgiving travel begins around November 21st, and lawmakers schedule a holiday break for November 24th. On Wall Street today, the Dow down 334, NASDAQ down 213, S&P down 35. Entrepreneur Mark Cuban testified today before the Senate Aging Committee in Washington about modernizing healthcare, how shoppable services improve outcomes and lower costs. The title of the hearing, which aims to highlight how price transparency and shoppable e-healthcare services can benefit consumers, drive competition, and reduce costs. Cuban is co-founder of Cost Plus Drugs, offering hundreds of common drugs at lower prices. According to WFAA, Cost Plus Drugs is set to partner with Trump RX, the Trump administration's website where Americans can buy prescription medication at discounted prices. During the hearing, Mark Cuban explained how drug prices are set through comparison of how Amazon works with businesses.
My Shark Tank companies hate selling on Amazon, but most don't have a choice. About 162 million Americans shop there, and if you want to reach them, you have to play by Amazon's rules. Amazon knows this and takes full advantage, adding and raising fees, and even launching competitive knockoffs. They get away with it because they control the marketplace and because 162 million people shop there, which makes Amazon incredibly sticky. So what does that have to do with healthcare? Insurance companies work the same way. Over 300 million Americans have some kind of coverage: commercial, ACA, Medicare, or Medicaid. Every one of those plans hires a pharmacy benefit manager, or PBM, to run their drug benefits. The biggest PBMs, all owned by the largest insurance companies, control pharmacy benefits for about 270 million Americans. That's a lot of power. And that's also 70% more people than Amazon reaches. Like Amazon, PBMs control the store shelves, but their shelves are called formularies. The list of drugs your insurance will cover, and if a drug isn't on the formulary, it's invisible to doctors and patients. But here's the kicker. Unlike Amazon, which wants lower prices, PBMs actually prefer higher prices. They say they negotiate lower drug costs, but they don't. They auction off access to their formularies to the highest bidders.
Mark Cuban, entrepreneur, co-founder of Cost Plus Drugs, testifying before the U.S. Senate Aging Committee, holding a hearing today on modernizing healthcare, making it more affordable. Some of the other witnesses include the co-founder of the Surgery Center of Oklahoma and the Free Market Medical Association, and the chief health director for CalPERS out of California. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
And welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Washington Post writing that hours after a meeting planned for next week between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hungary was scrapped, at least for the near future, Russia hammered Ukraine in an overnight attack that stretched into the next day, killing 7 people, including 2 children, and leaving parts of the country without power Wednesday. Again, that was from the Washington Post. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was in Washington, D.C. today for meetings, first with U.S. senators on Capitol Hill and then with President Trump at the White House. He met with Senator Thom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, and Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, co-chairs of the Senate NATO Observer Group, and those senators spoke to reporters.
Well, thanks everybody for coming here. I especially want to thank the Secretary General and the Ambassador for being here, where we've been given an update on a number of things, including what I think are very promising developments in our cooperation among the NATO members for resupplying not only Ukraine, but modernizing the whole of NATO. I want to express my appreciation for my partner, my Democratic colleague, Jeanne Shaheen, for all the work that she's done over the years with the Senate NATO Observer Group, and yield to you for questions. Maybe give an update on legislative
that'd be great.
Activity as well.
Well, I will just echo the appreciation to have Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, and Ambassador Whitaker here to give us an update on what's happening with NATO in Europe. I reported to them that we're very excited that in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee this morning we passed out the first 3 bills that address Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine today. One would declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism because of their kidnapping of Ukrainian children, and the second would allow us to move forward using the repossessed assets from Russia to support Ukraine in this war, and the third would be to take an effort at China to stop the war effort, their support for the war effort from China. All of those bills passed unanimously out of committee, have strong bipartisan support, and we look forward to getting them to the floor soon so that we can join the Europeans as they look at using the repossessed assets in Ukraine, and all join hands and do everything we can to support Ukraine.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, and before that, Senator Thom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, with reporters on Capitol Hill in Washington, standing beside them the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Mark Rutte made a statement and then answered questions about the war in Ukraine and the postponement of that meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump in Hungary.
Recently, Donald Trump suggested that Ukraine could win back all lost territory. Now he's saying something quite different. How worried are you that in that phone call with Vladimir Putin, he persuaded the president to go softer on Russia?
Well, I have total confidence in President Trump, and he is the only one who can get this done. He is the leader of the most powerful nation on earth. You are all citizens of the most powerful nation on earth, the most powerful economy, the most powerful military, and you have a president with a lot of experience because of his first term in office, and who has a clear vision on bringing this war to a durable and lasting end. He wants that. He wants to end the bloodshed. He wants to end the killing, and he knows how important it is. And this is a big deal for him, for all of us. So his leadership here is crucial. He is clearly providing it, and he has to dialogue with all the leaders. He has to dialogue with Putin. He has to dialogue with Zelensky, exactly as he did in Gaza, putting pressure on all relevant parties to get the deal done. And that's exactly what he is doing here.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, Senator. 2 questions for you. The first, to that end, do you believe another meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin would be productive? And second, do you think a ceasefire is necessary before real negotiations can start?
Well, let's start with the second question. The president himself was very clear this weekend. Stop where you are, which sounds simple, but of course is also exactly right. So I was I totally agree with him. Stop where you are. That's the main message. And again, again, we will dialogue this afternoon further, and I'm there to help him to deliver whatever NATO can do, me personally, the ambassador, all of us can do to help him to deliver on that vision. And clearly going forward, I cannot now predict exactly what type of meetings, in what type of setting will happen. But it will mean a lot of discussions with all the leaders involved, including the presidents of Russia and Ukraine, no doubt.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Capitol Hill in Washington after a bipartisan meeting with U.S. senators. The Secretary General then went to the White House to meet with President Trump. Between that time, outside the White House, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told reporters Trump administration plans to increase sanctions on Russia. He said it will be a substantial pickup in Russian sanctions. And reporters asking President Trump in the White House Oval Office meeting about the postponed meeting with President Putin and the new sanctions.
When we canceled the meeting with President Putin, it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington. So thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you tell us a little bit about why you're elevating sanctions against Russia right now?
I just felt it was time. We've waited a long time. I thought that we'd go long before the Middle East. And Mark, as you know, we did the Middle East plus 7. So we did 7 different wars from Pakistan and India to so many.
Azerbaijan, Armenia.
Which they said was impossible to do. All these wars I did. And the one that we have left, we have 1 left. It'll be 9. We have 1 left, and I think we'll get that done, too. I think we're on our way to getting it done.
We have to.
Mr. President,
please.
Mr. President, do you have a timeline for when you think this war is going to be over because of your leadership?
No, I don't have a timeline. You can't have in war, it's hard to have a timeline. You know, so many things happen in war. Go ahead.
What about Tomahawk missiles? Putin is definitely
Well, the problem with the Tomahawk that a lot of people don't know, it'll take a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, to learn how to use them. They're highly complex. So the only way a Tomahawk is going to be shot is if we shot it, and we're not going to do that. But there is a tremendous learning curve with the Tomahawk. It's a very powerful weapon, very accurate weapon, and maybe that's what makes it so complex. But it will take a year. It takes a year of intense training to learn how to use it. And we know how to use it, and we're not going to be teaching other people. It's too far out into the future.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office meeting with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. A couple of stories from Reuters. EU countries approved a 19th package of sanctions against Russia for its war against Ukraine, which includes a ban on Russian liquefied natural gas imports, the Danish rotating presidency of the EU said on Wednesday. And Russia said on Wednesday it had carried out a major training exercise involving nuclear weapons, a day after the United States announced a delay in plans for a second summit between Presidents Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump on the Ukraine war. This is Washington Today. NBC News Vice President JD Vance stressed Wednesday that U.S. officials were not seeking to babysit the Gaza Strip ceasefire and that Israel was a partner, not a vassal state. As questions rose over the next steps in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has hosted a string of senior American officials in recent days, exchanged words of friendship and optimism with Vance at a joint news conference in Jerusalem, as Washington worked to ensure the truce brokered by President Donald Trump will hold. That was from NBC News. Here is part of the news conference.
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Vice President, you mentioned the media. And a lot in the media say in recent days that Israel is becoming some kind of vassal state or protectorate of the United States, not only advising it what to do, but also commanding what to do. Why do you both comment on that? And also another comment on, will you allow Prime Minister Turkish security personnel to get inside Gaza?
Well, I want to put it very clearly. You know, 1 week they say that Israel controls the United States. A week later they say the United States controls Israel. This is hogwash. We have a partnership, an alliance of partners who share common values, common goals. We can have discussions, we can have disagreements here and there, but on the whole, I have to say that in the past year we've had agreement, not only on goals, but how to reach them. And I think we're pursuing them successfully. We've been able to do 2 things. Put the knife at Hamas's throat. That was the military effort guided by Israel. And the other effort was to isolate Hamas in the Arab and Muslim world which I think the president did brilliantly with his team. So those two things produced the hostages. Nobody believed we'd get them out. It was done by a cooperative effort. On the Turks, on the question of the Turks. I think, let me quote the vice president from yesterday. He said that I have very strong opinions on that. And he also said, we have to do it with, Israel will be obviously decide together on who does that. So I have very strong opinions about that. You want to guess what they are? Yeah, you know them. Okay.
I want to, guys, for a second. I want to address that. So, look, we don't want in Israel. We don't want a vassal state, and that's not what Israel is. We don't want a client state, and that's not what Israel is. We want a partnership. We want an ally here, and the president believes very strongly that if Israel honestly, with our Gulf Arab allies, can play a very positive leadership role in this region, to where, frankly, the United States can care less about the Middle East because our allies in the region are stepping up and taking control and taking ownership of their area of the world. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have interests here. That doesn't mean we don't care about what happens here. But we actually see this as an opportunity to build on the Abraham Accords. I think this Gaza deal is a critical piece of unlocking the Abraham Accords. But what it could allow is an alliance structure in the Middle East that perseveres, that endures, and that allows the good people in this region of the world to step up and take ownership of their own backyard. That's in the United States' best interest. I happen to think that it's in Israel's best interest, too.
Vice President JD Vance and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a news conference today in Jerusalem. Story from NPR. Vance is part of a high-profile U.S. team that's in Israel this week with the mission of keeping the truce on track and trying to extend it to a more challenging second phase. Netanyahu is universally known in Israel as Bibi. The Israeli media is calling this American contingent the Bibi-sitters. In addition to Vance, it includes Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of the U.S. Central Command. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also expected this week. That's reporting from NPR. Vice President Vance was asked about this.
Vice President Vance, you say that the ceasefire isn't on the verge of collapse, but why is it that the president said Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, now yourself, and then Secretary of State Marco Rubio to Israel this week, if that's not the case?
Well, to answer your question, look, this thing takes monitoring and it's going to take a lot of work. I was in the CMCC, which we opened up yesterday. A lot of our Israeli friends working together with a lot of Americans to actually mediate this entire ceasefire process, to get some of the critical infrastructure off the ground, from the international security force to some of the reconstruction in Gaza. It's not easy. I never said it was easy, but what I am is optimistic that the ceasefire is going to hold and that we can actually build a better future in the entire Middle East. But that requires some work. So it's not about monitoring in the sense of, you monitor a toddler. It's about monitoring in the sense that there's a lot of work, a lot of good people who are doing that work, and it's important for the principals in the administration to keep on ensuring that our people are doing what we need them to do.
Vice President JD Vance at a news conference in Jerusalem with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He referred to the CMCC, that's the Civil Military Coordination Center, run by U.S. Central Command, opened up in Israel. AP writing the International Court of Justice said on Wednesday that Israel must allow the UN aid agency in Gaza known as UNRWA to provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian territory. The Hague-based court was asked late last year by the UN General Assembly to determine Israel's legal obligations after the country passed laws effectively banning the agency, the main provider of aid to Gaza, from operating there. That was from AP. This is Washington Today. Back in the United States, some election campaign news. WMUR-TV in New Hampshire writing that John E. Sununu is officially running for the U.S. Senate seat he held for a single term 2 decades ago. Sununu announced his decision in a video in which he said that even he was surprised by his decision to seek the Republican nomination for the Senate. Washington, as anyone who observes can see, is a little dysfunctional right now, Sununu said in an exclusive interview with News 9. Sununu's entry into the race sets up a Republican primary with another former U.S. Senator, Scott Brown, and a competition for the support of President Donald Trump. Sununu's past opposition to Trump is well documented, and he said he's not focused on seeking the president's endorsement. That was from WMUR TV. And the top Democrat running for the New Hampshire Senate seat is Congressman Chris Pappas. It's an open seat. Democrat Jeanne Shaheen is not seeking re-election in 2026. In Virginia, the 2025 race for governor is underway between Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger and Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears. Newsweek reports that Spanberger is holding a 51 to 43% lead over Sears based on 10 most recent polls. Spanberger spoke at a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Tuesday night, joined by former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg and science educator and TV personality Bill Nye.
And the mission of traveling the world and of serving overseas and of endeavoring to answer some of the toughest questions so that somebody somewhere could make a good decision about an issue of national security, so that I could be working day in and day out to keep the American people safe. It was a mission I believed in. It was a mission that was incredible. And in 2014, after being overseas with our family, we were based in California, and we were bidding on our next assignment. And we brought out a globe. And at the time, my oldest daughter, she was 5, we brought out a globe, and we said, where should we go? It was supposed to be a teachable moment. Where should we go? Name your place anywhere in the world we can go. And my daughter said, Virginia.
Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee for Virginia governor, at the Jefferson Theater on Charlottesville Downtown Mall Tuesday night. The Republican nominee for Governor Winsome Earle-Sears was on Fox Business Channel on Tuesday, saying the polls showing Spanberger ahead are false. She also talked about Spanberger's position on old text messages with graphic and violent language from Jay Jones, the Democratic nominee for Virginia Attorney General.
Well, see, the problem for her is that she has on her ticket the nominee for Attorney General who has advocated for murder for his political opponents, and not just his murder, but the murder of his children as well, his 2 young children, 2 and 5, who, by the way, Jay Jones, the nominee on their side, he knows very well because they ran around the General Assembly building, and so he remembers them. And instead of Abigail Spanberger, telling him to get out of the race, she's made some political calculations that if she tells him to get out, well, certain people are going to be upset. If she tells him to stay in, other people are going to be upset. So she says, well, I'm just going to say I'm just disgusted with murder. She wants to be governor, and she's simply just disgusted with the idea of murder. Furthermore, she herself has said that to her supporters, let your rage fuel you. As if we don't have enough political violence. So I want to ask Abigail, rage fuel what, Abigail, and for whom, and to what end? So she is also, I believe, disqualified.
Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican nominee for governor, on Fox Business yesterday. Election Day is 13 days away, Tuesday, November 4th. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.